right. Hello, hello. Welcome one, welcome all. Let me know if you're hearing me loud and clear there in the chat. Please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and of course, the subscription button. And we're going to get, things going. And of course, I am also going to open the WhatsApp line just to hear from you there in the context of this conversation. So, as we know, tomorrow, all right, March 6th, all right, is the sentencing hearing for Jolyan Silvera. And the big question is, how many years will Jolyan Silvera get? All right, so that's the question. So, Rock and come in. We're going to share with you, as you can see there, we have the sentencing guidelines up on screen. And a big part of what we do here is, to just share with you facts and allow you to make your decision. All right. So, again, rock and come in, guys. Rock and come in. And, welcome one, welcome all. So, I'm just trying to get this page well fixed so that you can see that nice and clear on your screen. So comment in the chat. I'm trying to get into the comment section, but it's just not coming up yet. Okay, there we go. Winston, welcome. Winston is saying 5 years. Mats Morgan, welcome, welcome. Come on, guys. Please hit the like button, hit the subscription button, and let us just continue to grow stronger together. All right, we're going to bring you all the updates. All right, and we are here as well to share with you, just credible information. All right, in that context as well. So we're going to get going. So, in the context of, what's about to happen, Andrew, welcome, 25 years. There is a sentencing guideline. So there are guidelines regarding, how judges, in Jamaica administer sentences. All right, so we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to try to break it down for you as best as possible. So this is a document, so don't mind me scrolling. So I'm just going to go to where we need to begin. All right, so but I am just showing you that this information is publicly available, and we are here too as voices in education to empower you, to let you know that you can go and see it for yourself, you can read it for yourself, and that is also important. All right, so here we go in the context of the guidelines, and I'm going to try to make sure that you can see that, clearly there on screen. So, the objectives of sentencing. All right, so what are the goals then of sentencing in Jamaica? So, we're going to go there. So, we look here at the first point here in this document. And what it is sharing here is that sentencing is a complex process. All right. It involves the application of several factors. And sometimes these factors, they contradict each other. All right. Therefore, sentencing often, all right, is about arriving at the appropriate sentence, and that is really an art. And so it's not a mathematical formula, it's not something that you can just get up and calculate, all right, but it involves balancing several, a great number of considerations or factors. All right, so that's really what the first point there is saying. So I'm trying to also paraphrase as we go along. So in every case, so let's just move to point 2 there. In every case, it is the duty of the sentencing judge to strive to arrive at a just sentence. This will usually involve the application of the generally accepted principles of sentencing against the background of the nature and seriousness of the offense, the circumstances surrounding its commission, so that is the commission, the action, all right, that resulted in the sentencing, and the personal circumstances of the offender. So the offender is a person in this case, Mr. Silvera, all right. A just sentence is one which promotes respect for the law and its processes by reflecting adequately and proportionately an appropriate mix of all the relevant factors. Such a sentence is expected to be one which fits the crime as well as the offender. So that's really what proportionality is about, and I'm just going to try and see how best I can break it down, but it's pretty much what I said there. So a proportionate sentence, right, is one where, let's say, the seriousness of the punishment directly matches the seriousness of the crime. So just as how you would see there, in point, the third point there, such a sentence is expected to be one which fits the crime as well as the offender. All right, so it's the same thing here. So it must matches the seriousness of the crime and the offender's level of responsibility. And again, it's really described as the punishment must fit the crime. All right, so that's really the proportionate part of it. So there are some key components, and they're also here. So let's go to point 4 of proportionality. So these are the components here in point 4. All right, so a part of the components, so some of the components here would include the gravity of the offense and the degree of the responsibility of the offender. So the gravity or the seriousness, so this refers to how bad the crime was, including the harm, all right, caused to victims or the community, and the maximum penalty set by law. So these are some things in the context of the gravity of the offense. So the seriousness, so how bad the crime was. All right, so that part is important there. And then we continue here. We're at point 4. All right, the responsibility of the offender. So the degree of responsibility. So this pretty much looks at the offender's personal culpability. So for example, whether the act was planned, so whether the crime was planned, what was the motive of the offender. So in this case, they'll look at what was the motive of Mr. Silvera, their awareness, of the harm that they were causing. So these are some things that the judge will take into consideration in the context of the degree of responsibility here, the responsibility of the offender here in 1.4. So accordingly, they should neither be unduly harsh in the sense of being incapable of objective justification by reference to the gravity of the crime, the offender's degree of blameworthiness, and his or her, so like criminal history, so past history record there, nor unduly lenient in the sense of causing outrage to reasonable expectations of what is the minimum required for the protection of the public. So even that is taken into consideration. All right, so it should not be a sentence that the public is going to be outraged about. Like, what? This is foolishness, man. Oh, this will happen when, this person did this person did that. So these are some factors. And again, there are several factors that are taken into consideration. So things that the judge is going to look at in the context of administering, so handing down a sentence, and it's the same thing, handing down some prison time, if you want to put it that way. All right, so we go now, and in a little bit I'll just come to the chat. I'll just take a break and come to the chat. Linked to the principle of proportionality is the principle of parity. So parity is pretty much saying that, The sentence should be similar to what, other people who committed a similar offense, would have gotten. That's pretty much it. So this requires that, notwithstanding the need for individualization of sentences, there should in general be parity as between those who have been convicted of similar offenses committed in similar circumstances. All right, so again, that's what we're talking about when we talk about parity. So you cannot give somebody last week, let's say 15 years for something similar, and tomorrow the judge is going to give Jolyan, or Mr. Silvera rather, 5 years, right? So it has to be, and I guess that's a part of fairness. And just think about it. You go in and there is no standard, a judge can decide subjectively, even though there is some subjectivity in the context of decision making. We won't escape that. But at least you have something that you can weigh, that standard. You can weigh that standard to say, okay, this is, too much. When they talk about individualization, as you would see here in 1.5, the judge pretty much must tailor. So the judge must make a sentence or hand a sentence down. So it's the same thing as handing down, the prison time, based on the unique facts of the case, right? And the specific attributes or characteristics or circumstances of the offender. All right, so that is important too. So while they are striving for parity, they're also looking at, each case in its entirety to ensure that, okay, you know, this might be unique, and so it might mean, let's say 15, you have a case here with 7, you have a case here with 15, but this case is somewhat unique, not necessarily reflective of the case with the 15 years in its entirety, or the case with the 7 years. So perhaps to strike that balance, the judge might go, you know what, let's do 10 years. So that part is also important in the context of, individualization and parity. Welcome, welcome. If you're just tuning in, I'm looking in the chat. Matt Morgan is saying 10 years. Thank you for hitting the like button. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. And let me know if you're hearing me loud and clear there in the chat. That would be wonderful as well. All right, so let me know if you're hearing me loud and clear there in the chat. So again, welcome one, welcome all. And we're going to move on in a little bit. So again, welcome guys, welcome. Please hit the like button, please hit the subscription button, and let us just continue to grow stronger together. All right. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. In a little bit, I'll just check back in the chat. Just let me know if you're hearing me loud and clear there in the chat. So we're going to go to 1.6 next. Let's see here. Okay, wonderful. Okay, all right, loud and clear. Thank you. All right, so in the context of, I guess, a sentence, and let's just go back here regarding the objectives. So in order to achieve this objective, so we're talking about, parity, we're talking about individualization, All right. Judges must have regard to previous sentencing decisions of the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal to the extent possible in every case. All right. So here they are saying that in R, so this is a case. All right. So this was a case that, let me see if they have the citation here. R.V. Beckford and Lewis. Yeah, 1980. So this is a 1980 case. All right. In the year 1980. So obviously, this is still good law, and Jamaica still uses this case in the context of sentencing. All right. So this case, right, the Jamaican Court of Appeal in this case identified and applied the four classical principles of sentencing, all right, to ensure that punishments are consistent and legally sound. All right, so that's pretty much what it's just for the consistency, and again, and that legally it is good in that context, it's fair, and it's also considering sentencing factors such as individualization and all of that. So here, as stated in 1.6, the principles are retribution, deterrence, prevention, and rehabilitation. All right. So that's pretty much, four classical principles. All right. So in the context of, let's see if we can break this down for you. In the context of retribution, I guess this is pretty much the principle that, an offender, so if you commit a crime, you deserve to be punished because it's a wrongful act. All right. And so I guess that's just that in a nutshell there, right? And so it's really about um demonstrating that the actions or certain acts are intolerable, all right? And then deterrence. So the sentence should do that. So what this means is that it should prevent future crimes by discouraging, both the offender, so the person who is about to be sentenced, and the general public, so people from the public, from committing similar acts or I guess crime in general. So that's a part of it too in the context of a sentence. So it should do that as well. So again, deterrence is about discouraging the offender, so the person, so in this case, Mr. Silvera, tomorrow the sentence should send that message, discourage him from committing a future crime, and also the public too. So it's a part of preventing the public from committing, similar acts or just crime in general. All right, so that's a part of it. And then prevention, all right. So I guess it's tied into deterrence too, where the primary goal is really to protect the public, all right, by removing the offender from society. And again, this is usually via the prison sentence or the time that they will spend in prison. And then, rehabilitation is about reforming the offender so that they can reintegrate in society as a law-abiding citizen. All right. And so that is definitely important. And even in the most, I guess, serious cases, and judges sometimes they will consider if treatment or training might prevent like future offending. So these are some things that they want to do in the context of a sentence. All right. And let's see here. we talked about pretty much the character of the offender, and and we're going to look at some of that too, some other considerations in the context of how the judge is going to get to, all right, a sentence. So I'm just going to check back in the chat to see who is here. Matt Morgan is saying explanation of terms, law terms. Let me know some more what you're thinking there. All right, and I'm going to drop the WhatsApp number right now in the chat. All right, so that you can give me a call. Would love to hear from you while we get to the other aspects that will be considered in this case as well. So again, welcome one, welcome all. So happy to have you guys here with us. So please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and of course the subscription button as we continue to grow stronger together. All right, that is so important. Again, welcome one, welcome all. Let us know where you're tuned in from too. That would be fantastic. And in a little bit, we'll just go where we need to go. All right, so we're going to just move in this document a little bit. And I'll just try my best here to see. So the phone line is open. So please give us a call. All right. Would love to hear from you. There's a lot in this document. All right. But what I'm going to get at is really the fact that in the context of, sentencing, there are some other factors that must be considered by the judge, and these factors will be considered tomorrow as well in the context of Mr. Silvera's case. And so these factors are aggravating factors and mitigating factors. All right, so just to point that out to you. All right, so that is definitely important. And also a part of that, I guess before getting there, the judge will definitely have to select a starting point in the context of, sentencing. All right, so that is definitely important. And you can pretty much zoom in on 7.2 here. All right, so in arriving at the appropriate starting point in each case, the judge must make an assessment of the intrinsic seriousness of the offense, taking into account the offender's culpability in committing it, so the crime, and the harm, physical or psychological, caused or intended to be caused, or that might foreseeably have been caused by the offense. All right, so that is important there. That is so important. All right, so what I want us to get at really some real factors that the judge is going to consider as well. All right, so there's an appendix, and perhaps I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but let's go to section 8 here, aggravating factors. So in the context of this case, let me just double check in the chat to see if, okay, Marlon, welcome. And Marlon is saying about 10 to 15 years. So, Lucky Valley District. So, welcome. Where is Lucky Valley District, Marlon? Let me know in the chat. And you can give me a call, Marlon. The WhatsApp number is at the top there. All right. So, in the context of a sentence as well, the judge is going to consider certain factors, all right? So, aggravating factors as well as mitigating factors, all right? So, these things are definitely important in the context of, what the judge is going to consider. So that's a part of it, and I'm going to explain what we mean by aggravating factors, and I'm going to look at some of these, and perhaps you can tell me if you think these are going to be applicable, all right, in the context of, these factors. All right, so again, if you're just tuning in, this sentencing hearing for Mr. Silvera will be tomorrow, and the Chief Justice Brian Sykes will pretty much weigh a number of factors to determine a sentence, all right, for Mr. Silvera. And my understanding is that manslaughter does not have a minimum sentence, but I guess life imprisonment is really the maximum. All right, so what the judge is going to be doing, the judge will balance, aggravating and mitigating factors. So, aggravating factors, right, are elements or circumstances that increase the severity of or culpability of a criminal act. So, pretty much with the context of aggravating factors, what this means is that, it's going to increase the sentence. All right. So aggravating, it's going to increase the sentence. So the number of years. All right. So that's aggravating factors. All right. So here are some list. Here is a list, sorry, of factors. And they're saying in no special order of priority that are considered aggravating factors. So it's pretty much going to add time, all right? So in the context of prison time, the maturity of the offender. And I guess I can ask you this question. Would you say that Mr. Silvera is a mature offender? And perhaps, you're gonna say yes, that might be an aggravating factor, so a factor that will add time. Previous convictions for the same or similar offenses, particularly where a pattern of repeat offending is disclosed. Well, I don't know about that, so perhaps that's not going to be considered as far as I know, and based on what is in the news. I don't have his criminal records, I don't know, but we would have heard about that by now. So I would say that is not going to be a factor. Premeditation, question mark. Pretty much he raised the defense of provocation, so maybe this will not be considered a factor. So let's see. Attempts to conceal the evidence, I would perhaps say yes. And again, I'm not a lawyer nor a judge, but we're just reasoning things here. I would say yes, given what happened in the context of he did not report. What happened, we heard different stories about his wife passing in his sleep. We heard different stories of what happened. So, and even up until the point, even at the point of arrest, like he did not say that it was, as the other day we learned about, that he's accepting that he was the one who, unalived his wife. All right, so that's really hard to say. But I guess in that context, we could say yes, that's going to be an aggravating factor. And when we heard, the statement provided by Mr. Silvera via his lawyer, he shared reasons why he did not, say that he was the one, because he was fearful that the kids, they're going to lose both parents, or all of that. So we could perhaps check that one to say yes, that's going to be a factor there. Use of a firearm, definitely, that's going to be a factor. Use of violence, yes, we could say that. Abuse of a position of trust, particularly in relation to that offenses. So you could say, yes, I would say Mr. Silvera was in a position of trust in the context of his wife. He's the husband, the wife is going to have a certain amount of confidence in him, because this is somebody that, you are in a relationship with, you have a family with, you share, perhaps they share the same home. So that obviously I would say will be an aggravating factor, so a factor that will add time. All right, welcome one, welcome all. I'm just going to check into the chat here to see who is here and who is not. So if you're still here with us, guys, please hit the like button, hit the subscription button, and share. Tell a friend to tell another friend about the Voices in Education. All right, and again, welcome all. Welcome. Perhaps not the circumstance under which we want to be here talking, because it's very sad. Like, it's very sad. So I'm trying my best to go through this and to share as best as I can. But if you're in the chat, please remember to hit the subscription button, hit the like button, and let us just continue to grow stronger together. All right. And the WhatsApp number is also there in the chat. All right. So please, you can definitely give us a call. Would love to hear from you. All right. So let's see here. So this offense was not committed whilst on bail or probation, not that we know of. Prevalence of the offense in the community, I guess we can say yes. This is something that is prevalent in Jamaica in the context of intimate partner violence. So we could say that yes, this is going to be an aggravating factor that is going to add time. Operating in groups or gangs, I would say not applicable. An intention to commit more serious harm than actually resulted from that. Well, this one is very serious. It's extreme, so it resulted in death. So I guess it cannot be more serious than that, And so that is definitely important in that context. So again, welcome one, welcome all. Please remember to hit the like button, hit the subscription button, and let us just continue to grow stronger together. All right, and give us a call. We would love to hear your voice. We keep it real and respectful here. All right, so that is important for you to note. Oh, I think I missed this one. Any peculiar vulnerability of the victim. All right, so to break that down based on my understanding, it's about I guess specific characteristics or circumstances that perhaps make a person susceptible to harm or less able to defend themselves against a crime. So I'm just trying to think that, well, I guess you could perhaps say yes, a female perhaps not as strong. So maybe that one could be seen as an aggravating factor as well, given this context. But I guess in most circumstances, you look at this in the context of like children or the elderly, people who may be physically weaker, or perhaps more easily deceived. So maybe in that context, I don't know if it's going to be applied in this context. So depending on how they pretty much perceive this. So let's say if there was somebody with like a mental disability or a physical disability, yes, I could say that that definitely would apply. But yeah, so I'm not sure if this one is going to be, but we could perhaps put a question mark on this one. But for sure, there are quite a few aggravating factors from this list that will be considered in the context of, the sentencing tomorrow. Welcome one, welcome all. Let me just look back in the chat here and see who is here and who is not seeing any new comments in the chat. The WhatsApp number is pinned at the top of the chat. Give us a call. We would love to hear from you. Don't be afraid to comment in the chat, even to say hi, or I like what you're doing, or if you don't like what I'm doing, make suggestions. So just let us know in the chat. We would love to hear from you. And let me know if you're still hearing me loud and clear and if you're seeing what is on screen, because I'm just trying to navigate, all right, through this document as best as I can. So let's now go to the mitigating factors. All right, so we talked about aggravating factors, and the aggravating factors, they pretty much, are elements that will increase the sentence. So the mitigating factors are the opposite. These are circumstances or elements that will reduce the sentence. All right, so that's a part of it. And here in the document, it is saying mitigating factors are factors which reduce the seriousness of the offense or the culpability of the offender. The judge should take into account mitigating factors relevant to both the offense itself and the offender. So the offense itself as well as the offender. All right, so that is definitely important in this context. So, again, if you're just tuning in, we talked about, and there was one thing that I'm not sure if I saw it in aggravating factor, but I would say the victim impact statement. So the statements pretty much regarding like the physical and the emotional impact on the victim's family. So when you look at, Mrs. Silvera's family, how they took it, the children, so that should be something, I don't know, I can't remember reading that. But that should be considered as an aggravate. It's not going to help in this case, so it's going to be an aggravating factor. So in this case, I would say the victim impact. So in terms of the statements, in the context of, the physical and emotional impact on, Mrs. Silvera's family, their children, it's going to be an aggravating factor in this context here. All right, so again, the mitigating factors are circumstances that pretty much are elements that will reduce the sentence. And let's see here. And again, in no special order of priority, they include the following: youth of the offender. So he's not a youth, so he's mature. So we already stated that maturity age is going to be an aggravating factor. All right, immaturity. So we spoke about that. The mental state of the offender. We haven't heard anything. Well, and because you all know that this was in camera, meaning that it was not a case that was accessible to the public or to the media. So I haven't heard anything about Mr. Silvera's mental state, but it could be that tomorrow the lawyer will bring that in because, he has a very good lawyer. So maybe that may be there as well. The previous good character of the offender. So this is going to be a mitigating factor in his favor because, just being like a former MP, and perhaps businessman. So I think this is going to be a factor that will reduce his time. So obviously they're going to go to people who are going to get, can speak highly of Mr. Silvera. Absence of premeditation. So maybe this might be a mitigating factor just in the context of provocation that he raised. So I am thinking that perhaps, yeah, that might be. So we'll see. Reparations, I guess not applicable here. And then here you have the pressures under which the offense was committed, such as provocation. All right, so emotional stress might come out in that one because I guess based on what we were told or just a little that we know, he shared that he was being blamed for the death of their son. So you could perhaps say that's a lot of emotional stress, perhaps not getting over it. And maybe with this point too, I am thinking that we might get this mental state, like a report or something there in that context as well. All right, so again, these will be elements that will reduce the sentence. Let's see. I don't know of any loss of employment, for example, in this one. All right. Capacity for reform. This is going to be a good one for him because, he was an MP and all of that. They're going to so the lawyer is going to talk a lot about this context, and especially in the context that he had no prior record. He served this community well, he served the people of Jamaica and all of that. We're looking forward to hearing, I guess, some of that tomorrow. And then here we see the offender's role in the commission of the offense, where more than one offender was involved. So it was just him, all right, in this context. So again, I'm not sure how this would apply, but it was just him as far as we know. I cannot say anything more. That's what's out there. We're just using what we know. All right, cooperation with the police by the offender after commission of the offense. This should not be a mitigating factor because I think there was some perhaps tricked the police, or I don't know, but and then it wasn't until long after, again after he was charged for murder, that we heard about him pleading to, I guess, manslaughter and all of that, accepting that. So I don't think this will work in his favor. Cooperation with police. No, I don't think this one. Personal characteristics of the offender, such as physical disability or the like, I don't know of that. So I cannot speak to that. But if he does have a physical disability, or let's say a mental disability, I guess that's going to be a mitigating factor. All right, family background of the offender. All right, so that is something perhaps that is going to work in his favor. expressions of remorse by the offender. Maybe we'll hear some more about that, to say that he, loved his wife, all of that. So let's see how that works, and that he's really sorry, and will perhaps that's going to be a mitigating factor there. All right, and I'm just thinking, let's see if there's anything else that perhaps. Oh, prior record. I Yeah, that's going to be a mitigating factor. So a lack of previous like criminal convictions is going to be a significant factor, I would say. And then the guilty plea. So I would say in the context of Mr. Silvera, even though it came, as we would say, late, because he could have accepted or just let people know that he was the one responsible for his wife's death. But you have to also consider, hello, welcome, you're live. Let me just finish
Hello,
making
let me
this
know if you hear
point.
me.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Let me just finish
Go ahead.
making this
Go ahead.
point. So, I was just sharing that in the context before it leaves me what I was talking about. Oh, the guilty plea. So, in the context of Mr. Silvera, I think this is going to be a mitigating factor. So, even though at the start, he did not really state that he was responsible for his wife's death, the mere fact that, they kind of said, okay, I'm taking responsibility, there's the manslaughter plea, it pretty much still saved the court time and resources of going into a trial. And so this often, more than not, lead to a reduction in the sentence. So yes, that's going to be a mitigating factor as well. So, and again, provocation, we talked about that. Prior record, that's going to be pretty much none. So that's going to be a factor that will reduce the sentence. All right. So, yeah, that's pretty much some of those things that will be considered in that context. But what I want to say though is that the final decision in the context of the sentence will rest with the judge. All right, so the judge is going to consider all these factors. So the social inquiry report, and of course, they're going to get people who are going to talk good about Mr. Silvera and all the other legal arguments that are going to be presented during the sentencing hearing. Go ahead, welcome, talk to me. Ovi Wagwan. Hello.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, hearing you
I
loud
just
and clear now.
awesome, awesome, awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing good trying to get through this. But yeah.
Okay, great. Yes. So I was listening to what you were going through just now, and I'm thinking that he'll have some sort of what do you call it, mitigation. I think
Mitigating
the
factors.
provocation. Yes, the mitigating factors. I think, the fact that he is expressing that he was blamed for the death of their son. I think that's a strong one on his behalf, because he's going to probably say that that has been, eating away at him mentally, and that's what eventually pushed him over the edge. So, I think that one is going to be in keeping with the provocation aspect of it, and will support his case in that sense. But a lot of the other one is saying that using a gun in a weapon in that sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
aggravating
those
will
are
add.
really
Yeah.
those are really strong against him. So I think the judge has a lot to do, a lot to review in coming up
And
with
since
his
since you
sentence.
mentioned this over here, I forget to mention too that there is also the gun charge, and I know that Jamaica they had really they have some strong. I think the minimum would be like 20 years. So I am really looking forward to seeing how this will pan out, because now you have that manslaughter charge plus the firearm charge that is coming. So if that minimum is 20 years, and mind you guys, the next thing I guess, just Ovi just remind me to talk about sentencing and running concurrently as opposed to consecutively. And so that is going to play in here as well, because I think my understanding is that that's like 20 years minimum. So while manslaughter does not have a minimum based on my understanding, and the maximum is life, let's the gun charge, I guess, if the minimum by law is 20 years, I think that's the starting point for the judge in that one. But yeah, back over to you, Ovi.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what I have to say, to be honest, on this one. It's 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 a really, really sad case, and we're just hoping that these situations don't happen in the future. And what I loved was the fact that the judge has to take a lot of things into consideration, like things that I didn't know before today. For example, how the public would view the sentencing. It cannot be so harsh or so simple that it caused public outrage. So that was something that was good to hear. And also that they look at other cases that are similar, and the
Right.
fact that they're looking at a case that that happened so long ago in 1980, so like 46, possibly 46 years ago.
So
So
these are cases
it's
that are like legal, they set like legal parameters. So not until there's another case that usually goes all the way to a very high court that will pretty much overturn this one, but that's really like their benchmark that they will use. So they have some cases that kind of set the standard, and so over time they will
precedent
use
setting.
very much so. I was just trying to break it down, but very much so. You're there front of the class, man. You're there front of the
No
class.
man, no man. I'm in the class somewhere there, but I'm just wondering if it's the same thing. But that's kind of, as I said, a lot of things are well, should be taken into account, because I'm not sure what will be done. But it's interesting to see how things pan out tomorrow. But yeah, I'm thinking that probably he's going to get a sentence around that 10 years mark. That's what I am thinking. I don't
Well,
know what the other persons in the
well,
chat thinks,
I get a
or
few 10 years in the chat. So Marlon was saying about 10 to 15. Which is somewhere there. And the 10 years, I guess. So this is it too. So let's say the minimum, and this is where I guess we'll get some clarity, because my understanding is the minimum for the firearm charge is going to be like 20 years, right? So let's say the starting there for that charge, and the starting, let's say the judge is starting at about 15 years for the manslaughter, and then they do the aggravating and mitigating, and they add and they take away what they need to do. Maybe in the context of the sentences running concurrently, I don't know. Is it a case where it cannot be less than 20 years, where okay, we're going to take away this, and but I'm thinking around between 8 and 12, but that part with the firearm charge I'm still trying to figure out. But yeah,
yeah. But I hope justice will be served at the end of the day, and
that is it. Yeah.
that's kind of what I want. I know the family has been the young lady's family have been really out there, and making the case from their perspective, and that's understandable as well. But a case that you don't want to be repeated in any way or form or shape. And I can just imagine being a part of their family and how that would make me feel. So my heart goes out to them, and somewhere along the line.
All right, thanks for sharing there. All right, so very sad indeed, and it's unfortunate. But in the context of sentencing, so before I move to the appendix, I wanted to share here that um whatever time that Mr. Silvera gets tomorrow, all right, he will receive full credit for the time spent by him, all right, in custody. And so I think perhaps he has been there for about like a bit over 2 years now. So that is going to be subtracted for whatever it is that he will receive. All right, so that's a part of it there. And then, we talk about concurrent and consecutive sentences. And, in the Jamaican context, the sentences, they're going to run at the same time. So the sentence that he's going to get for the gun related offense, as well as the death of his wife, they're going to run at the same time. So it's not that he's going to, let's say the judge gave him 10 year on one and 10 year on the other. It's not that he's going to serve 20 years. The max would be the 10 years for both charge or sentences, and they'll take away, as I should just know, any time that he has spent in prison from that time. All right, so let's see if we can get to where I want to go to. Let's see. So a lot of things are outlined in this document, and so again, it's just important for us to note. So we're not looking at murder. We want to go to manslaughter. Again, welcome one, welcome all. All right. So this is it. And so with the context of this table, you will see section of the act, statutory maximum, statutory minimum, so the maximum time, the normal range, and then the usual starting point in the context of a sentencing. So if we're looking at the manslaughter charge for Mr. Silvera, all right, the usual starting point is 7 years generally, all right? And the normal range is 3 to 15 years, all right? So, what this tell you, the usual start point is 7 years generally. So let's say tomorrow the judge starts at 7 years. So that's like the usual start point. And looking at all these aggravating factors and all, and get to 5 years. If the judge gets to 5 years, then, or let's say it could be up because the aggravating factors are going to add. So let's say by the aggravating factors and the mitigating factors, let's say they cancel out each other and we're still left with 7 years. They're going to minus the 2 years from that. And then, we get like 5 years. So what you're seeing on screen now, that the maximum, all right, is life or a fine. So this is the maximum. And with manslaughter, there isn't any minimum, all right? And this is section 9 there. And this is the usual range, 3 to 15 years. So because Mr. Silvera, we don't know of any diminished responsibility that he was suffering at the time. So the usually sentencing is usually 3 to 15 years, and the starting point is usually 7 years. All right, so that's another factor that we want to consider in the context of the sentencing as well. Welcome one, welcome all. So, Ovi, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to keep my ears on the ground to see exactly how that one would pan out. And, I now you're making me want to know what happened in that 1986 just to see how he would run, the comparison, how which the comparison would be
I'm
between
not sure if
both cases.
this part is I'm not sure if this part is really from. I don't think this has to do with the case, this as in the starting point. But what came from the case were the principles like deterrence, prevention,
Okay,
rehabilitation, retribution. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. I'm here. I'll go in the chat to see how things pan out. All right.
All
So,
right. Thanks for calling in and sharing.
all right. Bye. No worries.
All right, guys. So we're coming down to gravy. So again, we're talking about sentencing here, and in Jamaica, sentences they will run concurrently. So at the same time, and so because the events, and let me just explain the same time, because the events occurred at the same time. So the gun was used to unalive the wife. So what will happen is that the manslaughter and the gun charge, all right, they pretty much happen in the same transaction, in the same event. So the sentences will be served at the same time. So again, if you're just tuning in, the starting point, so let me just go back to show you the top of this table here. So you'll see the first column will show you the section of the act. All right, the offense, sorry, on the first column, then the section of the act, the statutory maximum. So that is the maximum penalty, the minimum penalty, statutory minimum, the normal range in terms of sentencing, and the usual starting point. So, because this is a manslaughter case as we know it to be now, the maximum penalty is life or a fine. All right. And then there isn't a minimum. Sorry, there isn't a minimum for life for manslaughter. The normal sentencing range is usually 3 to 15 years, and the starting point is usually 7 years. All right. And so I guess in the context of, let's say, one charge gets more in the context of the sentencing, we were told, for, I think, is it 15 or 20, but there is a minimum, all right, a mandatory minimum that, for the Firearms Act, in Jamaica there, right? And so that is important for us to know. All right. And so that is going to be significant too in the context of, sentencing. Let me just fix the screen there. So, welcome one, welcome all. So, let's say I don't think the sentence is not going to be consecutive, it's not going to be one after the other, right? So let's say one of the sentences is longer than the other. I guess you will serve both sentences at the same time. So you are released once the, I guess, the longer term is finished. And I guess that's how it goes. If you have one that is longer than the other. I guess, yeah. I guess, yeah, in that context. But that is the reality. So you won't be, let's say you got 7, you're not going to do it consecutively where you do the 7, then you go to 20. No, I guess you will, whichever is longer than the other, then once that is done, you're done and you're out, in that context. So yes, guys, so that's pretty much the situation here. If the mandatory minimum for the gun charge is 15, then I suppose then maybe that's where it's gonna be. I am not too sure about that. I haven't checked it to be certain. And I was just like, while talking, I remember that that's going to come into the picture as well. But if you know, I am open to learning as well. You can share, but that is going to be a consideration in the context. Will they run consecutively one after the other? No. I believe that they're going to be run concurrently. And again, I am not a lawyer. I am just, reading, researching, and sharing. So if you have information that you would like to add, please do that. Let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comment section. And, we'll be here tomorrow to just talk about what it is. So a lot of, we got some comments earlier in the context of, what the sentence will be. So we got like 10 years, 10 to 15. I believe I got 3 years. Somebody talked about life. 25 years. All right, so we got some time. So what do you think the Judge Sykes is going to give and down tomorrow? But we'll try to be here tomorrow just to get, some reactions to the sentence that Mr. Silvera will receive. All right. Until then, blessings and love, everyone. And, continue to just be good. Just be good and, walk away from situations before they get too serious, Violence is not the answer. When I think about this situation, it's very sad. A family, they have lost their daughter, their sister, kids, they have lost their mom in a very traumatic situation. And I think that should be a very big aggravating factor too. The fact that, in this case, in the context of just the sentencing, the fact that, Mr. Silvera pretty much left his kids to find their mom. So that is pretty much a very traumatic and something that perhaps they will live with for the rest of, their lives. And the fact that, the kids, they were calling him, they didn't get him at the same time. And that part of it is really sad. You left, the your wife there knowing what you did, and then the kids. So that part is really hard. And I hope that, the family, the kids, they can get some form of healing. So prayers up. And I hope Mr. Silvera is really sorry for what he did and really understands the impact of his actions. All right, guys, again, continued blessings and love, and take care. We'll see you in the next one.